Well, hello everybody. Danny back from Deepsouth Homestead on Porch Time. And guys, I'm having to sit inside today because it is still so hot. I wished I had a place outside that I could go, and it'd be cool enough like we used to do in the shooting condo. I mean, it was cool. I could go down there and get up in that thing, but it's just way too hot now. Maybe one day we'll get back to doing it the old-fashioned way. And if I could turn a fan on where I could sit in a place and not have all the noise interrupting, that would be great too. I tried in my little building out here, but everybody said the echoing was so bad in it that, and it was actually cool in there because I have an air conditioner in there and I could turn it on for a while and then turn it off and it stays cool. And I could do it, but everybody says that the echo is too bad. Well, I'm working on that. I'm trying to get some stuff in there that'll sound deaden it so that maybe I can, use that in the future. But, guys, we've talked about this all along about how this kind of stuff was going to happen, the heat and the and everything that's coming around, the weather. A lot of y'all today are going to be dealing with Tropical Storm Beryl as it comes up through the United States, up through here, and it's going to go all the way probably to Canada, looks like. And guys, there's so much that we could talk about these storms and stuff like that is, we could say this about them, we could say that about them, but let me tell you this. It doesn't matter how much man manipulates it. God is still in control. And God has to permit whatever man does, because man cannot just take control of God's creation and do what he wants with it without God's permission. I mean, God has to allow it to happen. And that's the one thing I guess I find consolation in, is just the simple fact that I know the Lord is in control of everything. I don't really have to worry, even though man likes to take credit for and tamper with and do this and do that, to make his ego trip, something that he's fascinated with. I mean, God says God looks down upon him and just laughs at man's foolishness, but man's greatest wisdom is foolishness to God. And I find humor in that myself, that man thinks that, oh, look what I've done, and God's just sitting back laughing at him. So I don't worry too much about it. I am concerned about, there's some things I know about that I'm very concerned about. I actually had a friend send me some pictures of the Gulf of Mexico down toward Mexico, how that the water had receded away from the shorelines. It just went away, and that is usually caused by the tecton plates underneath the earth. We do know there's going to be places in the earth that's going to be rising. We know there's places that's going to be falling, like Italy right now. Italy's sinking. It's going down. It's gone down, like, what did they tell me, like 10 or 12 feet lower than what it was. And there's places in California that's sinking right now. And yet there's places that are rising up in the Atlantic. We have places in the Atlantic Ocean out there that's rising up. So we have places that are doing these types of things. And man is freaking out because of it. It's not new. It has happened before. And the reason I know that is because Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that has been, has been already. So man survived. Maybe not everybody, but man did survive and was able to keep going on. Now, I will say this, the weather is not what it was when I was a child. When I was a child, the weather was a lot colder than what it is now. The summers were not as hot. Now, before I was a child and when my father was a child, my father dealt in his early childhood, they dealt with extremes, just like we're dealing with right now. They dealt with record heat and record cold. He told me about living in these little shotgun houses that they used to live in because they were sharecroppers and loggers, and they followed the work wherever it was at. My grandfather never owned anything, and Dad would tell me that in them little shotgun houses, he said, "Son, we could see the chickens walking underneath the house, through the cracks in the floor, and in the wintertime they would lay quilts on the floor and rugs around everywhere to try to keep the cold air from coming through the floor at night." And he said, "We about froze to death." He said, "We had to go out and draw our water. There was no such thing as running water in the house. We had outhouses." He said, and back then, in the Deep South down here, people cured their own meat, hung it in the smokehouses. He said, "Son, sometimes the meat would hang in there 2 or 3 years and not ruin." He said, "That may get the skipper fly, may go in and drill holes in it. It may mold over." He said, "But you could skim and cut that stuff off, and the meat underneath it was still just as good as it ever was." He said, because it stayed so cold. As a matter of fact, he said when his grandmother, and I never knew anything about her, but he called her Grandma Lizzie. He said when Grandma Lizzie died, he said the men had to take pickaxe and pick the ground because it was frozen so deep. He said you could take your fingers and reach over and pinch the tops out of the cedar trees. They'd bowed over with ice and snow, just bowed over in the Deep South down here. He said because it was so cold. And then he told, and then even when I was a child, it wasn't that bad. But we did have, in the Deep South here, we'd have 18-inch snows. My dad would take me squirrel hunting every October the 1st, and there would always be frosts. And the fair would come toward the end of September, and everybody had to wear jackets and sweaters and stuff like that. And now in the Deep South, you're lucky if you wear a jacket and a sweater in November and December, let alone September. Definitely don't get a frost at the 1st of October. I remember as a young man, deer season would open up at the 1st of October for archery down here. And it would be cold. You'd have to wear a shirt in the morning. We'd get up to go dove hunting in the middle of September, and you'd have to have a long sleeve shirt in the mornings. I mean, it hasn't been like that in years and years. So we're in a cycle. The scientists that we know about and are friends with, their literature that we look at, tells us about the cycles and how that they have been, how that they're going to come again, and when they do, this is what will happen or that's what will happen. I mean, that's the way we know because we're working off of history, historical things that have happened before. And all of this is said to say it's going to affect our food system. And lots of people are telling me that we saw this on the live stream Saturday night. We really saw a lot of these questions. Why are my plants only making male blooms? They're not putting on any female blooms. Well, to my knowledge, in my years of experience, there is 2 reasons why this will happen. One, a plant always puts on male blooms first. It draws the pollinators in, and when the plant senses that the pollinators are in the flowers on the male blooms, it will make female bloom. The female blooms with flowers will come out. If there are no pollinators, the plant will not make female blooms. And then you just have the simple fact that because of the radiation that the Earth is absorbing right now from the sun and its solar flares through the magnetosphere in the Earth, it's absorbing tremendous amounts of radiation. As a matter of fact, the core of the Earth has been said, and I'm not a scientist, I just know the data that's given to me, that the core is actually slowed down to the point that it's going to start turning in the opposite direction because of the magnetosphere and how it affects the magnetic the way the magnetic side part of the Earth works. They're saying the core is a I get so much data in that it's a 22-mile ball of iron, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say it's a 22 or either a 200 or a 22-mile ball of iron that spins in the center of the Earth, which makes sense to me because iron can be affected through magnetic fields, and you can make a motor turn one way, or you can change the magnets and make it turn the other way, the current. So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, this is highly possible that all this is legit, you know. And the earth, because it's absorbing so much radiation, the plants are being irradiated in the soil. And when you irradiate the soil, they never really put on fruit like they're supposed to. Any of you who's been through radiation treatments, I know my wife that passed away she had radiation treatments like crazy. And I know how it affected her reproductive organs in her body. As a matter of fact, it just about done away with all of her reproductive system in her body. And of course, they told us that would be a side effect of it. And plants and humans are basically no different, because gamma rays are gamma rays, whether they're through a radiation machine or whether they're through the earth. And it's not like we don't know about this, because the USDA has studies done on these gamma rays and how they affect the roots of the plants and how they affect the plant themselves. So we know that through sterilization from gamma rays or through sterilization from no pollinators, we know that these are two of the reasons why we don't have any fruits coming on lots of our vegetables here. Now, I'm not saying there's not other reasons, because I'm not a genius in these areas, but I know that these are two things that I have been privy to know about. Now, where does this leave us? Well, we've got about 10 to 15 more years, my understanding of this, to go through, which at my age will be most of my life. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that, you know. And it'll be most of my productive life anyway, let's just say that. And if I live a normal life. And guys, the food system is definitely going to suffer because of it. You know, you'll see all throughout the Bible that during biblical times that there was famines mentioned all the time in the lands of the Middle East over there, where the biblical stories were written about. You know, we've seen famines in Bethlehem and famines, all around Egypt and all different places. The Bible just tells us about famine here and a famine there. When Jacob and them was north of Egypt, there was famines all in their land. And so when you see famines and stuff like that happening, now usually when there was a famine, there was not always a famine of everything. Because when they went down to entreat Joseph down into Egypt, their father told him, said, here, take dates and figs and different, he told them the things to take to give to him in return for grain and to pay for the grain. So we know that some things that the droughts and the famines did not hit. But we knew that the wheat and everything, it did hit. The grains and the wheat and stuff like that. So when we have these events take place, we know that we're going to be short on food. Well, anytime throughout the history that we've had shortages of food or anything like this, there's certain parts of the population that die out. Countries rise, countries fall because of famines. People take over other places because they have food there and they don't have anywhere they're at, so they go to war against them. But what is one of the big things? Think about what is one of the big issues with food now? First of all, if you go to the grocery store and you buy food, it's really not food. Okay, let's just accept that fact. It's not real food. All you got to do is look at the labels on it. And there's about 25 different things in every little thing you buy in the grocery store, and there's absolutely no need for it. The only reason it's there is to extend its shelf life. Used to, you could, if you bought bread and you bought it home and you set it on the counter and you didn't eat it within a week, it would mold. You can leave bread sitting on the counter now for a month and it won't mold. There's lots of things, different products that you would bring home, and if you left them sitting out, even if you left them in the refrigerator, they would mold because they still had the living enzymes in them. But today, there's so many preservatives put in food now that it doesn't matter what you do with it, it won't ruin. I mean, you can take a McDonald's hamburger and throw it out there in the yard, and if the ants didn't eat it, it would lay there in a wrapper for a month. As a matter of fact, I found, this is so sad, I found a sandwich in my truck that somebody left in my truck, because I don't eat sandwiches, and I don't even know how long it's been in my truck. I just happened to find it in there when I was doing looking for something in my truck. That shows you how much junk I keep in my truck because I'm working it all the time. But I found this sandwich in a bag, and it had not totally ruined. And I don't even know the last time anybody was in my truck that would have a sandwich. So I don't even know where it came from. I just know that it still wasn't completely ruined. It had a little bit of mold started on it, but not a lot. And I thought to myself, I said, now if this had been the old way of making bread and making sandwiches, that would have molded and went to mush within a week in the heat that my truck goes through. So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what is this doing to our human bodies? All of this stuff that is so-called food, most of it now is cellulose. It's made from wood products and stuff like this that's put into the food system as fillers. A lot of the chemicals that's compounded together, that's put inside the food system to preserve it. What is all of that preservation doing to the human body? Well, I'm going to tell you what it's doing. It's doing the same exact thing that formaldehyde does. When you are deceased and passed away, some people opt out of being embalmed. Now, my father, I did not embalm my father. He did not want to be embalmed, so I did not. Lots of people don't want to be embalmed because they want to go back to being what God said. They're not trying to preserve this human body. He said, they just want it to go back to the dust of the earth. They don't want it to lay in the casket for years and years and years and years in an embalmed state. So we're naturally embalming our bodies. Well, what does that do to the organs in our bodies? The organs in our bodies, a lot of us end up with a rapid heart rate. A lot of us end up with liver issues, kidney issues, because the kidneys they filter everything. Pancreas problems, leaky gut syndrome, Crohn's disease, which we know comes mostly from dairy. They won't admit it, but it's mostly from dairy. And there's diseases in the dairy industry they won't talk about. So, I mean, we have all of these things that's literally breaking our human bodies down. Now, is this new? And the answer is absolutely not. If you go back to the beginning, what we call the beginning of mankind, into the Garden of Eden, we know that Satan went to Eve. He knew it didn't do any good to go to Adam, but he went to Eve and he tricked her into saying, did God say this? Did God say you will surely die? And I'm sure that Satan probably reached up and grabbed one of the fruits off the tree and ate it, and he didn't die. He said, did God say that you would die when you eat this food? I mean, he's probably looking there going, oh, I didn't die. So Eve actually partook of the fruit, and we see that she said, it is good. It does taste good. Now, everybody always looks at that as an apple. There is nowhere in Scripture that says it was an apple. That's nothing to do with an apple, to be honest with you. More than likely, it was probably a pomegranate or something. But the bottom line is this. When you stop and think about it, now God owned the garden, okay? The tree that he told them that they could eat of, and the tree that they could not eat of, could have very well have been the same exact tree. Simply because of the simple fact that he was the owner of the garden, and because he was the owner of it, he had the right to say, whatever tree you eat of, you can eat freely of, except this one, because it was his tree. If he didn't want them eating from it, he could tell them. And it didn't necessarily mean that it had to be anything about the tree that caused it. It was the disobedient act that caused the death. And people want to say it was something in the fruit that caused it. No. It was not anything in the fruit. The fruit was probably perfectly fine to eat. It was the act of disobedience on Eve's part that caused that. But now I want you to notice something. God did not at that moment, God did not punish mankind. Now he punished womankind, said that she would, travail in birth and all that. But God did not punish mankind until Adam himself partook of it. Now, Wanda and I have talked about this here a while back, how that when God casts down judgment, he usually goes through the male side to do this, because he put the man, the head over the home, and the head over the church, and the head over everything, and over his creation. And usually it's when man makes a decision that God does the punishing because of. Now, he didn't let Eve off. He did say that she would travail in childbirth because of her disobedient act. So, and I've talked about this on Porch Time way back yonder. I don't even remember how far back it's been. It's been way back yonder. That Satan went to the one thing that he knew that Eve and Adam partook of on a daily basis. In order to live, they had to have food. And he went to the one thing that they could not do without, and he attacked them in that area. Now let's fast forward all the way, 6,000 plus years, or close to it anyway, since that point, or that's what they say. And where are we at today? Well, today we're back at the same place to where mankind has to have food just like he did then to be able to survive. And the devil knows that the only way really that he can break down the human body is through what goes into the mouth and through the organs of the body to sustain the body. So therefore, if we genetically engineer everything, if we fill everything full of chemicals and pesticides and all kinds of stuff, then we can break down. The devil can break down the human body, and he can basically destroy a person's life. And we, as God's people, we should know these things, and we should try to do like, Jeremiah 6:16 says, to return to the old paths wherein are the good ways. We should not to say we go back to horses and buggies and hoeing in a garden with a hoe, but we need to go back to raising our own food. See, we've become so trained by the system. And if you don't believe we're trained, just go around and ask somebody today, especially a younger person, ask them, where does your food come from? And I'm going to be willing to bet you that probably 90% of them, or close to that, will say, from the grocery store. And as long as in their mind, if they believe that, then nothing seems to bother them. They just go to the grocery store and get what they want and come home. And then they end up with diabetes, and they end up with, fatty liver disease, leaky gut, Crohn's. I mean, you name it, whatever. There's 1,000 different things out there that we can end up with. And they think to themselves, well, I'm just a young person. Why is this happening to me? My grandparents lived to be old people and never went through anything like this. Well, your grandparents never had the chemically laden food and preservative laden food and non-mineralized food that you partake of today. Because if you eat pizzas or hamburgers and French fries and weenies and hot dogs and cakes and cookies and ice cream and all this kind of stuff today, you're filling your body full of nothing but fake food. And lots of people go, but I go to the fresh produce department. Still, it's no good, because it's all had radiation run through it to kill any living enzymes in it or any bacteria in it that causes it to spoil. And everybody goes, well, that's healthy for me. No, it's not. You've got to have those living enzymes in your body to create the acids in your stomach to make you, in order to make you live healthy. If not, your body will have to create its own acid in its stomach, and you'll end up with GERD or acid reflux and all this stuff, which is simply because the food you're eating is dead. And Satan is still attacking the human body in the end times that we're living in through food. It was done in the beginning. Mankind was destroyed in the beginning with food, and he will be destroyed in the end with food. Now, how much more of this are we going to take before we actually step up to the plate and admit we need to be more responsible about our food system and take it back into our own hands rather than letting Big Brother do it for us, and get rid of the conveniences of life and say, well, I'm just going to go to the grocery store. Well, the grocery store food is being laden with, guys, I've had more videos pulled down already this past week that from way back in 2020 and 2021. They're going back on my videos now, pulling them down, because I mentioned certain things, and if you know what I mean. All these different things are now being put into the food systems that we've been trying to avoid for so long. Good Christian people out there said, well, I ain't never going to take that in my life, you know. I don't believe in being done this away with, you know, and all this kind of stuff. Well, the bottom line is this. You're going to get it through meat. You're going to get it through vegetables. You're going to get it one way or the other if you don't start raising your own food. Now, a lot of people go, well, I go to farmers markets. Well, let me tell you something about farmers markets. We've got a big, giant U-Picket place not far from where I live here. That thing is so laden with chemicals, it's unreal at the amount of chemicals they use on that place. And people go there, and they pick that stuff, and they head to the farmers markets with it. And people at the farmers markets think they're getting this super healthy food that's been raised by this poor old farmer out there, and he had nothing to do with any of it. He went to a U-Picket and picked it, and he takes it and sells it. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You know, I mean, Wanda and I, sometimes we sit and think about what's it going to be like when we come to the day when we can't get out and actually raise a lot of our food anymore. You know, we're going to have to really trust the Lord to take care of us and help us to have enough around our property here through permaculture that we can actually survive. Now, I'm not saying we'll have all the luxuries of life, but that we can survive. And I would encourage anybody who has the ability to do permaculture to please get out and do it. Go and start studying your food system. Start studying the preservatives that's put into it. Look into Cargill. Look into all of these things that has anything to do with food, and you'll understand that you're a guinea pig right now. So how far will they go with us before they actually say enough? Before we say enough is enough. Thank you guys from Deepsouth Homestead.